Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Institute for Government and this conversation with the European Union's Ambassador to the UK, João Vale de Almeida. I'm Bronwen Maddox. But we've got an awful lot to talk about, and I think there are going to be a lot of great questions. So just a few housekeeping rules before we really get into it. Send in your questions throughout the event. Do start now if you'd like. Type your question into the Q&A panel you'll see on the right of your screen, and it's great if you add your name and where you're watching from. We're always glad to know that. We're going to be live tweeting from IFG events using the hashtag IFGBrexit, even though we are post-Brexit. Please follow and tweet along, and we're going to have a video and sound recording of the event on our website within 24 hours. So thanks again for joining us. Well, we've got a lot to talk about, as I said. The start of the post-Brexit relationship between the UK and the EU has been marked by tensions, vaccine distribution, Northern Ireland Protocol. But these are also issues where close cooperation is needed. So how should the UK and the EU work together to implement the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, just ratified in the European Parliament, and the Northern Ireland Protocol? What are the other areas of shared interest ahead of the G7 summit, which is coming up very fast on us, and the climate change conference at the end of the year? What can be done, as the newspapers are putting it often, to improve relations between the EU and the UK after really quite a few scratchy weeks or even months? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by the ambassador. He became the EU ambassador to the UK in February 2020. We're saying it's not been a quiet time for him. He was previously EU ambassador to the United Nations and the first EU ambassador to the United States, beginning in 2010, and he's also had very senior posts in the European Commission, including as the chef de cabinet for European Commission President Barroso. So, Ambassador, a very warm welcome to the Institute.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Great to be with you and all those in the audience.
Let's kick off with one of the most obvious questions about the relationship. At the start of this year, the UK government decided not to grant you full diplomatic status. Has it made a difference to your role?
Well, I don't think the decision formally been taken. We are in conversations like we do in the diplomatic world. There is a new diplomatic representation. There's a negotiation on what we call the establishment agreement. These discussions are still taking place, and I'm confident that we will find a solution that is in line with international practice.
Right. Has it actually made a difference so far, even if you're heading, as you hope, to a more optimistic resolution of that?
You know, in the diplomatic world, and the UK became a third country, so our relationship with UK is a diplomatic one, like we do with 140 something other countries in the world, where we have ambassadors like me, like I was in the US and at the UN. So it's only normal. So it's about recognition. It's about respect. It's about it's about the formalities of diplomatic life, and that's an important aspect. But again, I'm very hopeful that we can soon come to an understanding on how to organize this diplomatic side of our relationship. And once that is the case, we'll be even in a better position to contribute to a constructive relationship.
An immensely diplomatic answer, if I may say so. How would you, if you take a step back from this very turbulent year and a bit in which you've been imposed, the year not only of Brexit but of coronavirus, how would you characterize the state of the UK-EU relationship?
Well, I think the year, as far as 2020 and part of 21 is concerned, it's been absolutely atypical for all the reasons you mentioned. The pandemic, the global recession, but also a very unique situation. If we sort of stop a little bit, a few minutes, and think how unique this situation is. It's the first country that left the European Union after almost half a century of very close relationship. It's the first time that we were asked to negotiate towards divergence rather than towards convergence, which is what we normally do in the European Union through different waves of enlargement. And at the end of the day, the result is an agreement that is by far the most ambitious and the most comprehensive, the widest agreement we have with any other country. And I think this is true for the United Kingdom as well. And we did all this in a few years of relative volatility in terms of the process, a very complex negotiation. But I was happy to see by Christmas time that we had been able to not only agree that the terms of the divorce, the withdrawal agreement, but also the terms of engagement for the future under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. I think this is not a minor achievement. And today, and I'm very happy to have this conversation on the exact day in which the European Parliament has voted overwhelmingly in favor of the TCA. So I believe we are starting a new phase right now. But if I look at the first 100 days, the first 100 days of this relationship,
we're not there yet. Yeah.
we won't have time for the 100 years. But if I look at the first 100 days of this post-Brexit relationship since January, what do I see? I see, first of all, and some are overlooking that aspect, I see an abrupt transition because we had, of course, an institutional Brexit in 2020, but the real economic Brexit only happened on the 1st of January. And the agreement was achieved on Christmas Eve. So it's exactly 1 week between achieving agreement and implementing it. So it's only normal that such an abrupt transition causes difficulties in terms of implementing it. And the other aspect that I would say characterizes the first 100 days is the adaptation, the need to adapt. And that's valid for administrations, that's valid for business, that's valid for citizens. We had to adapt to a very different situation that maybe some people underestimated. And then the third aspect that I would say is that on a number of sensitive files, there was some tension, let's be clear, on the Northern Ireland Protocol, on vaccines, which has nothing to do with Brexit, but still it's part of our bilateral relations, and a few other irritants that all this created a certain degree of tension. It lowered the level of trust, created some here and there some acrimony in our relationship, even led us ourselves to legal action against the United Kingdom. So I think this is basically what characterized these first 100 days, an abrupt transition requiring very swift adaptation, a few sensitive files that created some tension. I hope that from today and from this beginning of May, we can enter a second period of 100 days until, I'd say, summer break, where I hope we can move on and we can change the mindset and we can start looking for a more constructive atmosphere. Okay,
well, thank you for that. I want to come on to some of those points about implementation and about the next phase, if you like. So if you just take, as you've referred to, the European Parliament voting, big majority, for the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, what difference does that vote make?
It makes the whole difference in terms of democratic support, democratic scrutiny, from the European Parliament. On our side, you had your own ratification in the UK some months ago, but it's very important to complete the democratic pillar, which is composed, of course, of the Parliament and the Council. And I hope that until the end of the week, the Council will formalize the Member States' agreement and ratification of the deal. And from the 1st of May, it will be fully enforced. It makes a lot of difference in terms of the tools and the mechanisms to manage this relationship. You've seen dozens of committees and subcommittees and specialized working groups with a joint partnership council on top of it. We hope that joint partnership council will meet soon, because that's a signal of a working relationship. So that's a main difference. The democratic accountability and endorsement, the operationality of the deal through all the mechanisms and tools. I think that will make a big difference to the way we can work together. Because be under no doubt, this is a relationship that, because of its intensity, because of its depth, because of its complexity, will require a lot of meetings, a lot of talking, a lot of exchanges across the channel, and the infrastructure, the institutional infrastructure created by the TCA, I think will provide the platform for people to get to solutions. Yeah. Because one of the things that you saw in the first quarter was some unilateral decisions taken by the United Kingdom that are not part of the, let's say, the rules of the game. I think that if we had up and running all the infrastructure of the deal, maybe we could have prevented that, and I certainly hope that that will not be repeated in the future.
Well, thank you for that, and I agree with the two facets that you've singled out from this vote: the democratic point, and then also the point about all the structures that are now going to be in place, all the meetings, all the committees, and so on. As the IFG has been writing, that those things are now there to manage the relationship. But committees and things aside, there is the possibility now that the UK begins to diverge in some ways from the EU. Where is the EU particularly looking, and where is it most concerned?
I think you can conclude from the whole discussion about level playing field during the negotiations where our main concerns are. But let me tell you something also about my experience in the first quarter. I've been talking to business people, to different branches of industry, for instance, manufacturing, the food and drink, agriculture, and beyond. And I always ask them, so how much do you think Britain should diverge, and how much do you wish Britain to diverge? And so far, at least, but that's maybe an empirical evidence on the basis of a few, although important contacts, what I've got back is we don't seek a profound divergence because we are so much linked to your market that we understand that too big a divergence will create more problems than it would solve. But this is just my impression from what we've seen. In any case, one of the issues for the Partnership Council, for the different committees that we've left to establish, is to look at those aspects. We'll be looking at that. We've been watching. My delegation is part of the system of observing and monitoring the relationship. We'll be looking at all that. The question is to be able to, when we spot, identify, or anticipate an area of divergence that can create, turbulence in our relationship, is to immediately address it in the mechanisms that we have in the treaty, in the agreement. And that's another reason why it is important to have this capacity to, through dialogue, through exchange of information, address the situations as they come. And many situations will come to the table, that's for sure, because this relationship is so close and so intense that inevitably we'll have to deal with a number of issues.
And so complicated. I'm thinking of just, again, one of the most recent disputes, not the biggest on the whole radar of everything that has has been argued over on this, but France in particular concerned about small fishing boats not having access and threatening various officials and politicians commenting of oh, we'll hit back at the City of London. There's a very severe quality to that, if you like, a sense of reactions perhaps not always being proportional. Do you have confidence that all these committees and structures can scoop up all these points of friction?
I think maybe one of the main challenges we have is to manage this relationship in a way that produces solutions and not exacerbates problems. And the number of committees that are about to be set up, and now we can really create them because the treaty has been fully ratified, they will address these issues. Experts will be meeting, people that know the files, people that know in depth what is about. And I think this will largely contribute to sort of de-dramatize the situations. But there will be, I mean, no doubt about that, there will be situations more critical and more intense where there has to be a political management. And but that's what you have when you have such an ambitious agreement and such an interconnectedness, interdependence between our economies. On the issue of one sector being impacted by the other, that's part of the construction of the TCA, as you well know, and that's a tension that we will have to manage as well. Our attitude, if I may say so, is one of being pragmatic, being flexible in trying to find solutions for those problems. With one caveat: we are not about to renegotiate treaties that we've just approved. This one today in the Parliament, the withdrawal agreement some months ago. No, it's not about renegotiation, but it's about finding together, not unilaterally, but together, solutions for problems that will arise, for difficulties that maybe are not inevitable, in a consensual and constructive approach. That's on our side, our attitude, and I believe that once this machinery is really working, things will run smoother than in this phase, which is a little bit of an atypical phase, where the treaty and the agreement is in fact already in force provisionally, but the mechanisms to manage it are not yet there.
All right. So I hear what you're saying, and I hear the faith, which I understand, in the mechanisms getting going, the ways of talking to each other, and so on, and that it's still early days. But let me ask you about one of the most controversial points, which is the Northern Ireland Protocol, and I can see a lot of the questions coming in already are about that. I'll just pick one before I go properly to questions. But John Newham asking, is the Northern Ireland Protocol sustainable? There is growing opposition to the protocol in Northern Ireland, a feeling that this is not just teething troubles, that this is something that one whole community there feels it may find very, very difficult to live with. How are the EU and the UK going to reach a solution on this?
Well, let me say from start that I am extremely attentive to the situation in Northern Ireland. I observe it from London because we don't have an office in Northern Ireland. I observe it from here. Brussels is extremely attentive because the first reason being that we are totally committed to the success of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. We were there from the beginning, I would say even from before the beginning of it. We have been sponsors, we have been supporters of it. We still are financially supporting large programs in Northern Ireland towards reconciliation and peace building inside Northern Ireland between the two communities. So we are absolutely committed to the success of the Good Friday Agreement. And so this is top of our concern. But I want to be very clear about one point. The protocol is not the problem. The problem is Brexit and the shape of Brexit and the impact it had on Northern Ireland. Let's be clear about that. Right. Everybody knew from the referendum and from the choices made to leave the single market and the customs union that Northern Ireland will be the most difficult, the most intricate issue to be solved. That's why it took so long, and you remember very well the different stages of the negotiation around the withdrawal agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol. It was complex. It was like squaring a circle.
But Ambassador, you're talking about it as if it is solved. And yet the
protocol is there.
Discomfort with it. Brexit is done.
Brexit is done. The protocol is British law and EU law, and it needs to be implemented. Now, how do we implement the protocol? With a flexible and constructive spirit, but within the limits of the protocol. Because the question is very clear, Bronwen. Who has an alternative to the protocol? No one has put on the table an alternative to the protocol because there isn't. If there was one, we would have identified it between Europeans and British colleagues during the negotiations. There is no alternative. So the protocol is the only solution that was found for the problem created by Brexit in Northern Ireland. What we need to do now, and we are absolutely determined to do that, is to, with a constructive spirit, finding solutions for the real problems that people feel there. And I have enormous respect for those who feel problems that may arise out of this situation. But I also believe that the protocol contains solutions for those problems if it is fully and properly implemented. So we are working very well in recent weeks we have been working very well with our British friends in trying to find exactly those solutions. And I'm confident that in the spirit of dialogue, but also reaching out to the Northern Ireland civil society, to business people, to the political world, we can find those solutions. I'm hopeful that that is possible within the limits of the protocol.
May I just ask you, have you been to Northern Ireland?
Yes.
Yeah. When did you go there?
September last year, when COVID allowed. I used my first trip out of London, out of Great Britain, even out of England, I would say. Yeah, out of England. I went first to Northern Ireland and then to Wales. So that was my first visit. I went to Belfast, to Derry, Londonderry, elsewhere in the territory. I met all the political forces. So I keep in touch from distance here with Northern Ireland.
And so then I'm sure you've heard face to face one of the points that people make, which is that should the EU not show some flexibility?
We are showing flexibility.
Given the discomfort that it is causing.
Absolutely. We are showing flexibility. I'm telling you, we are showing flexibility. But the solution for the problems in Northern Ireland is not around the protocol, is not unilateral action by the British government, as they did in March, which led to our legal action. The solution is us working together as we are now. And I'm very happy to acknowledge that in the last few weeks, at technical level, very good work done by our specialists, our experts, at political level between Vice President Maros Šefčovič and Lord Frost. There has to be a qualitative change in the atmosphere, which I'm sure will lead to practical, pragmatic solutions within the protocol, addressing the legitimate concerns that the business people have in Northern Ireland. So we are flexible, we want to be pragmatic, and we are showing that as we speak in discussions that are taking place.
May I just ask you about one detail, but I will come back to this maybe in questions, because I can see there are a lot. It's about the question of agri-food rules, and really the question is whether the EU would consider anything other than a UK commitment to alignment on those rules in order to reduce the checks which are causing so much of the friction at the moment.
You know, one thing that struck me in my visit to Northern Ireland, and mostly in our recent times in our outreach to civil society and business and even political parties, was the consensus around the issue. SPS is the most difficult one. You know, if we have an alignment of legislation on both sides, the problem will be solved. And we agree with that. I'm not sure the British government agrees with that, but we are, as we speak, looking at those issues in a very open way, and to see if we can find solutions that will reduce the impact of that situation. For the moment, as you know, we are pretty much aligned because you know, the UK was a member until December. There have been few changes in our SPS rules, but not of a huge importance. So basically, that is a level playing field to some extent. The question is to see how we can progress into the future. I think we need to be at the same time loyal and faithful to the protocol. Very much aware that we need to protect and preserve the single market of the European Union, but at the same time, you know, flexible and constructive enough to try to find solutions for this problem. So on SPS, as much as on any other issue that is occupying us these days, I can guarantee you that first, we are committed to stability in Northern Ireland, Good Friday Agreement, peace and reconciliation, prosperity for Northern Ireland. And secondly, we will look at all possible solutions that are compatible with the protocol, but still address and respond to the legitimate concerns of people.
Let me just change subject briefly and talk about vaccines, where there was obviously a point of tension between the EU and the UK, now rather cooler. What lesson do you think the EU and the UK should take from this?
You know, my first lesson is that we should not try to have beauty contests out of a tragic pandemic. I personally refuse to engage in who is doing better or worse. The second lesson is that this virus is not, the fight against it is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Let's see where we'll be at the end of this race. If I look back a few months ago, at the beginning of the fight against this pandemic, almost a year ago, the debate in the UK was about how much is the UK lagging behind Europe in the fight against virus. Now the perception is slightly different. Let's see where we are in September, but certainly not engaging in beauty context. And the last lesson is that I think we need to be very humble regarding this virus. I mean, it surprised us, everybody. No country, not even the biggest, the most powerful countries in the world were capable of really dealing with this virus. So we need to be very humble now with the new variants, with the new changes in the virus. God knows what can come down the road. So let's stay humble. Let's de-dramatize the issue. At the same time, we need to protect our taxpayers' money. That's why we launched recently a legal action against one producer, because we thought he was not fulfilling its commitment. So at the same time, we need to be very, very keen on that. And last point on this, we are very much open to the world. We are the biggest exporter of vaccines as we speak, and will continue to be. We are the biggest, one of the biggest supporters of COVAX and Gavia to reach out to the developing world. So I think, you know, with all the modesty that we should have in this, I'm quite proud of what the European Union is doing on this front in a situation which is very different from a nation state or a single country.
Let me start with the many questions that we've got coming in now. And the first one I want to pick up on a different area again, on foreign policy. And of course, the background of this, that formal cooperation on foreign policy was not included in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, though it was in the political declaration in 2019. And we have a question from Uffe from the UN Association in Denmark, saying the EU is talking about a more geopolitical EU. The UK is talking about global Britain. Can we be good partners in global issues and foreign policy?
Not only we can, I think we should. And I think we are condemned to be, if I can say it this way. Why? Because first of all, we share the same values. And that's a great deal of commonality. You know, human rights, rule of law, democracy, you name it. There is no daylight between the UK and the European Union, and that's a very solid foundation for cooperation. Secondly, we have a common strategic interest. If you think of some of our global partners, we are very much aligned. If you think of Russia, if you think of China, if you think of the way we look at Africa, for instance, our concern about our neighborhood, our common neighborhood. I think there's a lot of ground. If you think of Iran, where we are doing great work together as we speak to try to salvage the JCPOA, and not to mention the transatlantic community in which we are, you know, active partners. If you think of the G7, where between us and the UK, it's a large majority of the G7, the G20, and beyond. So for all these reasons, I think there will be a high degree of cooperation among us. We propose to the
Ambassador, just as you're talking, whether you mentioned Russia, whether the EU actually has an agreed stance on Russia. There's really a big range of attitudes towards Russia within the EU. Germany often seems to be, in a sense, having its own nuances to that. How would you describe?
I think the word nuances.
How would you describe the EU's approach to Russia?
I think the word nuances is a good one. We have a common line. We have 5 principles on which we stand regarding Russia. We have just adopted a new set of sanctions, as you know, against Russia. We have sanctions enforced without interruption since the annexation of Crimea. So it's a pretty common sort of frame of positions that we have with UK, with Russia, and then you have some nuances, of course. But the European Union is about diversity as much as it is about unity.
Thank you for that. Right, I've got one with a philosophical touch to it from Peter Barnes saying, would it be possible to have better trading arrangements than those allowed for in the trade and cooperation agreement without jeopardizing the single market?
I think for the moment, our focus should be to implement the TCA, the Trade and Cooperation. I mean, it's not 5 years, not 5 months old yet. It's a little baby, and we have first to take care of the baby. We allow him to grow, to consolidate, to start walking, and then you know, and any relationship is a living relationship, is an evolving one. I don't know where we'll be in 5 years, 10 years. I don't know where the European Union will be in 10 years. I don't know how the Union of the United Kingdom will be in 10 years either. So I don't know how the world will be in 10 years. So I don't think we should exclude any evolution. But for the moment, obviously, in my view, in our view, the focus has to be in making this agreement work. And we're very encouraged by the overwhelming support of the European Parliament today. We had an overwhelming support from the British Parliament some months ago. So we have the democratic basis to make this work. Business people are adapting very quickly to the new realities. And I think we now, with the structures that we referred to, the dialogue that we need to have among ourselves, that should be the focus. Implement, make this work to the benefits of business and citizens. And then we'll see how this will evolve. You know, the agreement, and you know it very well, the agreement has a number of elements of evolution. There are review clauses, there are, memorandums of understanding that we still have to conclude. There are areas where there are moments where we'll look again at the issues from fisheries to energy and others. So there are dynamic elements in the agreement that, if need be, would allow us to improve, to make things work better. But for the moment, at the early days of this baby, we need to help him or her, if you however you want to call it, the analogy. We have to help this agreement to grow and produce results. That's our focus right now.
Right, as I warned you, there's quite a lot of questions on Northern Ireland, and I want to take some of them now. We start with one from Shauna, who's saying, on the protocol, will the EU be pragmatic on border control checks? Northern Ireland's population is under 0.5% of that across the EU, and yet the documentary checks, according to the systems that have been completed so far, would represent a fifth of the equivalent documentation right across the EU. So about, you know, the burden of checks that has turned out to be in place, and whether the EU is going to show any flexibility on that.
As I said earlier several times, we are going to show flexibility within the limits of the protocol, within the limits of the protection and preservation of our single market. These are the boundaries in which we need to operate. But within those boundaries, as I said, I'm sure, I have no doubts that we will show all the possible flexibility to address the situation. But we also expect, on the British side, that the number of commitments made will be fully implemented. You know, infrastructures in Northern Ireland, access to a number of tools on the British side, you know, a number of areas in which there is still some work to be done. And that's where we're working right now. We're working together to find a sort of a common roadmap to move forward in terms of compliance, in terms of implementation of this agreement. But again, I'm very encouraged by the atmosphere I've been witnessing in the last few weeks. I think this promises a lot in terms of the results that can be achieved. So I'm hopeful, if not optimistic, about the outcome. But we should not forget where we come from and why we are here.
So I have to say the majority of the questions I'm getting in on this subject are not happy with the state of play at the moment. And so I just want to stay on this for one moment, because it really is arousing a lot of passion in the UK, as you will know. Was one from Paul Lever saying, your claim that the EU is flexible and constructive on the Northern Ireland Protocol would be disputed by unionists. Even the more moderate of them argue that the degree of intrusiveness and bureaucracy which the EU is insisting on is grossly disproportionate to actual level of threat to its single market. Is your insistence that there can't be any change to that based on a genuine threat assessment And for example, how can you justify restrictions on pet travel when Great Britain is rabies free?
Again, I to the risk of repeating myself, we are showing and we will show all the possible flexibility. And that's what I've been witnessing, listening and reading the reports of the conversations that have taken place in the last few weeks. You can count on that. We are not there to create problems if problems are not necessary to be created. But we cannot forget the framework in which we operate here and the complexity of the situation created by the departure of the UK from the single market and the customs union. But again, and this has been said in recent days by my leaders, President von der Leyen, Maroš Šefčovič, we will show flexibility, constructive spirit within the limits of the terms of the protocol and the preservation of the single market. But we are very open and very attentive, and in a active listening mode to the concerns expressed by everybody in Northern Ireland. And again, we are reaching out to civil society, to the business people on a permanent basis, and you will see more of that in the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. Let's leave that subject for the moment. I'm sure there's more coming in. And change tack a bit. One from Peter Wilson-Smith saying, there has not been much progress in reaching a meaningful agreement on financial services. Why?
Well, I'm happy to acknowledge that we have reached an agreement on a memorandum of understanding on regulatory cooperation in the financial area. This is a very important development, which was foreseen in the treaty. We managed to have that agreement. We are concluding the sort of ratification of that memorandum of understanding, and I hope that very soon this forum of regulatory cooperation can proceed. I have the experience as a former ambassador to the United States of the same kind of body that exists between the EU and the United States. And I can tell you that from experience, this has revealed to be a very useful tool to bring together regulators, to bring together the authorities on both sides. Once that forum is up and running, the Union will come back to the issue of equivalence decisions. We have taken 2 decisions. The UK has taken some as well. And we're looking at other areas where equivalence decisions may be appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Again, a different tack, one from James Calder saying, do you think that the EU is likely to react positively to starting discussions on mutual recognition of professional qualifications via the partnership agreement? And what's the EU's view if an individual member state wanted to make a bilateral agreement with the UK to recognise qualifications?
I think we need to look at that issue or any other issue against what we have recently agreed in the TCA. I mean, I see too many people, in my view, jumping to renegotiation of an agreement that we have just agreed upon. And we took some time and difficult negotiation process to get that deal. Already, stepping away from that deal let's take the time to make this deal work first. We also have to see in that area or any other where the competencies lie. As you know, our system is relatively complex. Some areas of competence are union competence. Some are member states, some are shared. So we will need to see exactly in each situation. There are other areas that have been mentioned where people would wish to go further than the treaty or be less ambitious than the treaty. I think the rule of the game today is to implement, make this agreement work. It's only fully ratified and fully enforced on a permanent basis from next week. Let's make it work. Let's look at the different aspects from our side. I think, again, you can count on an open-minded and constructive approach.
Okay, thank you. Back on the Russia point, one from David Wilson saying, how will the new sanctions imposed on Russia make any sense while Germany is still intent on buying Russian gas?
Well, the sanctions make sense for the reason they have been adopted on basis of human rights, as the previous sanctions make sense because they were based on unacceptable behavior by Russia. So you have to judge sanctions on their own merits and the purpose for which they have been created. Otherwise, as I said earlier, there are common elements of our policy towards Russia. There are nuances in different countries of approaches that respond to their national needs and concerns, and we have to respect them.
Okay, we're coming towards the end. Lots of questions, but we're going to stop cleanly.
Yes, let's go ahead.
Let me just try and squeeze in a couple more. One from Sandra Katuri. Where America and Joe Biden fits into this, really?
I think, again, I've been ambassador there and ambassador to the UN. I lived 99 years in the US, so I'm a little bit biased, maybe. Or maybe not. I think it makes a lot of sense in the present global context, and you know what I am talking about. In the present global context, that countries like our 27 countries, the UK and the US, try to reach levels of understanding and agreement and even common action. We are very, very encouraged by this new administration. There were very early contacts with President Biden, with Secretary Blinken and other members of the cabinet. There is now a summit being announced for June, EU-US summit. We have the G7 here, where all of us will be together for the first time with President Biden. I'm very encouraged by all this. I'm encouraged by decisions taken by the American administration regarding climate change or JCPOA, just to give two examples where they come back to a sort of a mainstream, which is very much in line with our positions. And I see also our British friends very much on the same platform. So I have no reason not to doubt that there is scope, potential, and in fact need for good cooperation among the three of us, if you want, either bilaterally or trilaterally or multilaterally. For instance, if you take multilateral dimension, I mean, there is multilateralism is being challenged, and we need to preserve the system that we helped to build. I hope it will, for instance, translate into the re-election of the President Secretary General of the United Nations, who was a European Union citizen, just an example, but also the reform of WTO, which is very urgent, or WHO, which is equally important. And I think on many of, if not all of these areas, we can find a good platform across the Atlantic, and in a new format, of course. The UK is no longer a member, but I'm sure we can find ways to make this a very productive, multiple relationship. Okay, I'm going to try and let me ask one quickly from Simon Sweeney of whether you think policing, intelligence and data exchange on security have been damaged. Well, I think that in many areas, if not all areas, we work better together than separate in terms of effectiveness and efficiency of our efforts. But the agreement went a long way in that direction, and I think again, implementing it, but also the dynamics of our dialogues around the implementation of the agreement will be very useful in terms of the quality of our cooperation. So again, I believe that once we start, properly managing this structure that we have created on paper, and then it becomes a reality on the ground, and I think it will even change the atmosphere and have people, approach it in a slightly more practical way, more constructive way, and more minded about the facts than about the rhetoric. Okay, thank you. And I'm going to squeeze in a final one, just on the news of the past hour or so, of Arlene Foster stepping down. And David Martin says, do you accept that this resignation is likely to bring new strains to the trade and cooperation agreement? Well, I don't want to interfere in internal affairs of the United Kingdom or of Northern Ireland, and even less so internal matters of the DUP. We have had a good relationship, a good dialogue with Arlene Foster in different moments. She has been part of many meetings where we discussed the protocol in the Joint Committee, where she's part of and also listened to. And I've had good contacts with the DUP leadership and their different representatives. So we'll continue to talk to DUP, whoever the leader is.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, I promised we would end at 15:15, and we will. Thank you. There's a lot of terrific questions. Catherine in Scotland, thank you very much. You put eloquently one of the points about the management of the border. We couldn't keep going back and back over that territory, but Ambassador, I can tell you that's where a lot of the heat and the of the questions coming in has been, and as you can tell, a lot of the attention in the UK.
Yeah, but it's only normal, you know.
Yeah.
Bronwen, it's only, I don't take it as anything strange or special. It's only normal. It's part of the process of building something new, of squaring a circle. I was saying in Northern Ireland, it's complex, it's difficult, it's sensitive. We are very much aware of that. We don't want to create problems where we don't need to create problems, but you have to understand that we have to manage the situation which was not created by us, but there's an impact in our own single market. So we need to look at that. But our main purpose remains peace and reconciliation, stability and prosperity in Northern Ireland. Whatever we can do to contribute to that, we will do.
Ambassador, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. My pleasure.